Okay, so today we're going to talk about social media and mental health. And we've talked about this before, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert by any stretch of the imagination. Um, but I listened to a lot of podcasts on it, and I have a pretty good interest in it. So I also was trying to make this so it wouldn't be redundant to other information. So kind of keep it fairly quick. So if I can move my slides. All right, so kind of just to look at a little bit of the social media use across the board, changes that maybe we've seen. And despite certain, social media platforms being used less than they had been in the past, still quite a bit of use across the board. YouTube continues to be the top platform used among teens. I don't even know exactly when YouTube started becoming something that was considered social media because I kind of didn't realize that it was, but maybe that shows my age. So YouTube is used by most folks, TikTok being right behind that. And then, a little bit of back and forth with some of the things. Facebook is used less and less by younger individuals. But what's interesting is you actually see a little bit of a change in this or variation depending on household income brackets. So household incomes of $30,000 or less, the teens tend to use Facebook and TikTok mostly. But household incomes of $75,000, $75,000 for the family or more, they're more likely to use Be Real. And I only heard about Be Real about a year ago. So I don't know if any of you guys have heard about it or used it, but you do see these variations across household incomes about which platforms are used by which groups. Teens are on these platforms a lot, and many admit that it would be quite hard for them to quit using them. Interestingly, teens are more likely to say that social media has had a negative effect on others than themselves. And the largest portion of them say that it's neither had a positive or negative effect on themselves or really anybody else, but you can see that they're on it quite a bit and they're on different ones for different periods of time. But, still quite a few of them are saying that it would be difficult for them to give up and that they are probably on it more than they need to be. When it comes to adults, we might be using social media for different kinds of things. So adults use social media a lot too. We may be engaging in different content and different platforms. Adults are much more likely to report using Facebook and far less likely to report using TikTok or Snapchat. I'll come back later to why I'm highlighting the fact that the news piece and where people get their news and how many people report getting their news from social media. I'm sure you could guess by the caption on the left, but you could see that the percentage of adults who report getting most of their news from social media platforms is higher than you would anticipate, or higher than I would anticipate at least. So the academic literature around this is mixed. I mean, there's studies that indicate that using social media can help enhance interpersonal relationships. It does provide opportunities to connect with others, to express creativity, express some pieces of our self-identity. It can be a place to receive social support, practice interpersonal skills. Maybe if you're less comfortable doing so in person, now you can practice them through a technology-enabled platform. It allows folks to engage in advocacy. But then there's other formal research that shows that social media links to lower self-esteem, depression, anxiety, eating disorders. And parents, I mean, obviously worry about this. So a Pew survey looked at parents' thoughts, and nearly half of the parents with teens were highly worried that their child would be exposed to explicit content. And they're very concerned that the use of social media could be causing mental health issues. And you can see that teens they're, a little bit all over the place. They do report having very positive experiences. Some of them report negative experiences. And the challenge is that the academic literature we all know how difficult it is to conduct formal research studies that are going to get into peer-reviewed journals. I mean, thankfully, we learned quite a bit from the Stanford Prison Experiment and Stanley Milgram and Zimbardo back in the day, but we have IRBs and lots of ethics rules around stuff like this now. So it's hard to do a really good study, with a general population that's ethical. So I particularly like this quote. It's been used on a podcast, Your Undivided Attention, quite a bit. They often go back to quoting Charlie Munger, who was an investor and a philanthropist. And he said, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. Another thing that he had said that's kind of related is the iron rule is you get what you reward for. So if you want ants to come, you put sugar on the floor. And I'm bringing this up to kind of show why we need to be concerned, or why there is concern around social media, and kind of how the social media works, and where some of the concern might come from. Very much the incentive. So social media platforms run based on what is called an attention extraction economy. So they make their money by monetizing human attention. And so attention extraction economy just refers to that. It's how technology platforms profit from the monetization of human attention and engagement. It is the basis for their profit. I believe that Google was the first to start doing this, but once Google was doing it successfully, then platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of them started using that Google system to be able to monetize and be able to make money for their companies. So the same principles that are used to create targeted ads apply for ranking content in social media feeds, the news feeds. These platforms use AI and a system of algorithms that create or modify the algorithms themselves without human intervention through a process of continually optimizing for better results. This is what you'll hear referred to sometimes as machine learning. But machine learning creates very powerful feedback loops. It personalizes what each user sees and allows it will continue to evolve with the user's shifting preferences. So perpetually showing each person what keeps them the most engaged. And unlike traditional algorithms, which are hard-coded by engineers, machine learning algorithms train on the data that's inputted and correlated with it. So the better it learns about you, the better it gets about predicting your future decisions, what keeps you engaged in the future. So again, this works on like the ads. So they're going to target certain types of ads to women, certain types of ads to men, but it also starts targeting the types of content that you see in addition to the ads. The other issue is that these are designed to be addictive. So the World Health Organization actually held a 3-day meeting in Tokyo back in 2014 to discuss the public health implications of excessive use of the internet, computers, smartphones, and electronic devices. Their concerns were about the similarities between the signs and symptoms of internet gaming disorder or gambling disorder and substance use disorders, and then this excessive use of technology. Studies show there's comorbidities between problematic social media use and a variety of mental health conditions, cyberbullying, deficits in emotion recognition, and sleep disturbance. And the boundaries between normal and abnormal or excessive pathological use versus okay use is really a challenge to define, because it really can depend widely on individuals, on cultures, on what people are engaging with while they're in the platforms themselves. There's also generational effects and social norms. There is some research that is indicating that people with a high attentional impulsivity are at higher risk for developing problematic use with social media and online platforms. And there's testimonies by various adolescent psychologists that were consulted in some Amnesty International work. So Amnesty International partnered with the Algorithmic Transparency Institute and AI Forensics to publish several reports specific to TikTok. But they've been able to show that TikTok has this highly addictive feature, and the For You feed is so personalized that it creates this endless scrolling to keep people really tapped in. And they're using the same kinds of reward mechanisms that slot machines do. So one potential negative side of this is what's called a social network use disorder. It has a couple other potential names because it's not officially in a DSM or ICD-11 yet, but it is something that folks are looking at. So there's some of the parallels to gambling disorder or gaming disorder or substance use disorder are things like preoccupation with engaging in social media, neglecting other interests or activities in order to do that, continuation of engaging with it despite negative consequences, lying to others about how much time you're spending on it, attempts to stop using it that are unsuccessful, using it to relieve a negative mood state, and then when actually taking time away from it, having withdrawal symptoms. And when they've looked at some research around this, they actually were able to show that frequent checking and push notifications actually correlated with higher rates of cognitive lapses. So people forgetting things, not being able to keep track of things, actually behaving a little bit clumsier. And that the auditory portion of this, so like the auditory notification on smartphones or computers, is shown to attract attention, which then induces a craving response. So that craving to check the online device or platform, whatever it is, which does impact task performance. And so the reward system of our brain is creating this state of motivation for the impulsive behaviors. And it's been shown to kind of go across the board, but particularly with people with a more of an attentional issue. Another issue is that social media, because of the algorithms and because of the way that they're set up with this kind of addictive but smart in order to keep you engaged, since that's what it wants, is it wants your engagement, your attention, is it can amplify cognitive biases. So all humans are obviously susceptible to cognitive biases. But the longer one spends on time on social media and the more narrow the content is that we see because of the algorithms, what it does is create echo chambers potentially of outrage and negativity or polarization. So you see this in like political polarization, a wide variety of types of polarization. Just pick any of the stories that we've heard about in the last couple of years, you can see that it's polarized in social media pretty easily. And that's because of the algorithms. It also leads into confirmation bias, people having some cognitive distortions, fear of missing out, which has its own whole litany of issues that may or may not be real. And this is particularly troubling for youth. So between the ages of 10 and 12, the receptors for dopamine and oxytocin in your brain multiply, which makes social rewards feel more satisfying. So for an adult, yes, we respond to social rewards too, but we might be more susceptible to some of the other cognitive biases. For ages 10 to 12, these kids are just naturally, their brain wants to engage more with social rewards. And so if the more you're exposed to good, that's great. The more you're exposed to bad, not so great, because they're going to respond pretty distinctly to this. And one of the major concerns that Amnesty International found with their TikTok studies was that within 20 minutes or less, teen accounts, if they had signaled any interest in mental health content, within 20 minutes, they were shown videos related to depression and self-harm. And the algorithm, the companies know that this is happening. So Frances Haugen, she was the Facebook whistleblower that testified in front of Congress, repeatedly came back to the idea within her testimony that Facebook's algorithm incites misinformation, hate speech, and even ethnic violence. Amnesty International was able to show that Facebook had an engagement-based business model that resulted in impacts of amplification of extreme content, violence, hatred, discrimination, which led to human rights violations and abuses in places like Myanmar and Ethiopia. And in essence, these companies are profiting from the vulnerability of children, teens specifically, but profiting off of both the vulnerabilities and kind of natural human biases that all of us are susceptible to. What that has resulted in, so while the academic media or the academic literature might not have a ton of this, there is enough going on out in the real world to show us that there is a major concern. So because of this, there are major lawsuits coming about towards all of the social media companies. So obviously bigger than the concern about addictive behaviors is the damage that engagement, especially engagement at a problematic level, can actually result in. So there are far too many accounts of the damage suffered, so much so that actually 41 states and the District of Columbia just back in October filed lawsuits against Meta, the company that runs Facebook and Instagram, alleging that the company was intentionally designed with features that harm specifically teens and young users. So they're looking at this from kind of a faulty consumer product type of law. And the Social Media Law Center is engaged in actually lawsuits against Meta, TikTok, Snapchat, and Discord. And they're applying these principles of product liability law with the hope of forcing social medias to improve consumer practices, things like potentially changing their algorithms, verifying user identities, because there's been a lot of bad things. So there's wrongful death lawsuits, harmful death or harm caused to physical and mental health from addiction, sleep deprivation, eating disorders, lawsuits about how explicit and inappropriate content is shown to young people based on their gender and race. So people being exposed to content around guns or fentanyl, content that promotes dangerous behaviors. So like the blackout challenge, and even exposes and pushes sexually abusive and exploitive content towards young people. One of the stories that I think haunted me the most was the story of a 16-year-old Long Island teenager who had no history of depression or anxiety, was on TikTok, and after a short period of time of the TikTok algorithm showing him thousands of videos that promoted suicide and self-harm, he took his own life. So there's major kind of scary consequences of this that do happen. And what's kind of in addition scary is that what you're hearing is just don't take away the phone, because I can imagine even when my kids were younger, so my kids are in their 20s now, but when they were younger, the thought was, well, if they're doing something inappropriate on the phone, just take it away. But what we're seeing apparently is a number of teens who, once their phone is entirely taken away, their social media access is taken away, then they end up dying by suicide. And so to quote a lawyer who's involved with a number of these lawsuits, that is actually the level of addiction that these products are causing, that just to completely remove it causes such a level of distress that children are losing their lives. So what can we do? A lot of things, but understand and discuss the risks and benefits of social media for yourself, with your family, with your kids, with your clients, the people that you work with. Create and guideline and plans for social media use. Not all screen time is equal, so understanding what we look at and when and how to engage, and how to potentially even trick the algorithms or not let the algorithms find a way to put you into a rabbit hole. Helps you develop alternative interest areas and activities outside of things that are connected to technology, whatever those might be. Removing the auditory and visual prompts, so silencing push notifications, those little, on the Apple phones, you get the little bubble that tells you how many notifications you have to see. I've had those turned off for a long time. We should do those for our emails too. Nobody needs to see how many emails they have pop up on their phone when they look at it. It's anxiety producing, so just turn those off. Having periods of digital detox, just get yourself completely away from it. And if it actually gets to a bad enough degree, there are some studies that show that some cognitive behavioral therapy in combination with short periods of kind of a break from technology can be very helpful. And one thing that I think is worth noting is that there is actually a new Ohio law that started as of January 15th, where under this law, parents, any social media operators, so this really, it's a wide breadth of things. So it's not for anything that's engaged in e-commerce or just posting reviews or like your Netflix account, but anything that would count as social media has to do these 4 things in order to have young people actually join onto the site. Now, how this is running in practice, I've yet to see. And there are other states that are trying to put in similar laws that are having some legal battles. But the idea here is that they want it to be so the parents have to be aware of if their children, if the person 16 or under is trying to engage with social media, and there have to be some kind of protections around it. So it is an attempt to get parents more on board And when Pew studied this, the majority of adults and actually the majority of teenagers, even though it's far less percentage of teenagers than adults, but still a good number of teenagers think that it's a good idea to have people verify their age and get some parental consent for engaging in these various platforms. If you really want to do a deeper dive, I listed a handful of resources. There's some pretty good videos through the Social Dilemmas website, also through humanetech.com, socialmediavictims.org. There are some resources for parents, and then also the APA Health Advisory on Social Media Use. So some good resources that can be potential positive to share. And we'll stop my share and open it up for questions, comments, or discussion. I don't know that I can answer questions.